Okay, so welcome. Today's webinar is about the number one career killer that attorneys are never taught. This is a fun topic, and I think you'll enjoy it. And it's a good topic for this week and kind of headed into the 4th of July. And I think it's a topic that's actually very important to talk about and very pertinent, especially because of the state of the legal market right now that is such that a lot of people may be taking jobs and things for granted because of the way the economy was a year or so ago and when you may have gotten out of school, or even if you're a senior attorney, the way the economy was not too long ago. The other day, I was talking to an associate in a New York law firm, and this person was talking about joining a law firm with about 35 other first-year associates several years ago. And it was a very interesting conversation because he told me that on this very first day, he and other new attorneys were all assembled around a conference table and were informed by a partner in the firm that within 5 years, most, if not all of them, would be gone. And he didn't give an explanation for why. He was simply telling them a pattern that he'd observed during being at the firm for several decades. And the idea is that very few people in the most competitive law firms out there make it. And at the same time, if you think about it, why is a law firm and a partner there telling all the new associates that? It seems the kind of thing they wouldn't be saying. And it's almost as if when an attorney starts in a new firm, that they're essentially being told to pack their bags and look for a new job the moment they arrive. And there's that feeling that a new attorney has that there's no stability and that they could lose their job at any moment. And why on earth would a law firm go to such lengths to make a new attorney feel unwelcome? And it's not just like that in law firms. It's like that for new attorneys. It's like that for even people that are law students. You feel unwelcome by the legal profession because it's very hard to get into, and a lot of firms are never going to be interested in you. It's like that for practicing attorneys when you look for jobs, and law firms don't open up to you right away. So this is a very hard profession. There's no doubt about it. And more about that and why law firms do that in a moment. But the attorney that was talking to the story about the story to me and was now looking for a job was very proud this prediction come true, because he told me that he and only one other associate in the firm of that original group were part of the firm anymore. And like most attorneys, this is very common among attorneys. He was talking about having a lifestyle and other things that really don't make a lot of sense for attorneys to be talking about, unless, frankly, they're not working for actual clients and they don't want to be attorneys. Most attorneys will tell you, and a lot of them do, especially more and more attorneys now in the market than there used to be before, talk about things like work-life balance. And the people that talk about this, unfortunately, no matter how smart they are, no matter how good of a school you went to, and I don't say this in a positive sense or a negative sense, but what happens is these people never really amount to much in the law, and they don't have the best careers, or the careers that are occasioned by working for the best clients, or careers that are occasioned by having the most prestige or making the most money. And that's fine. Not everyone really has commitment or just isn't cut out for practicing law in a high pressure environment. And that's just how it is. But it's important to realize that the second you start talking about things like lifestyle and not having commitment, that it's going to have an effect on your career. But it's also important, I guess, at the start to think about, why are legal jobs so high pressure? Why are there so many demands made on young attorneys and older attorneys? Why do law firms do this? And, why also are people tested in their ability to pay attention to very small details, to work incredible hours, and to do this day after day and week after week, and frankly, year after year? When I was practicing law in a large firm, I remember I couldn't believe it. I was living in downtown Los Angeles and at the time, and I went into the firm on the 4th of July, I think, to pick something up. And to my astonishment, there was more than half the firm was there on the 4th of July. And you wonder what is going on? But you have to think, of course they were. It was a firm at the time that was of people that had, the majority of the partners, it's changed now, but most of them are from a firm called Cravath, Swaine and Moore, and understood that you have to work hard. And they took their jobs incredibly seriously. And they didn't care that the 4th of July fell in the middle of the week. They just literally believed there was no excuse to stop working. And if you have a serious legal problem, why would you want any attorney that was concerned about their lifestyle when push came to shove? What would that possibly do for you? What would be the benefit of working with an attorney that was like, wanted a lifestyle? Would you want someone like that who needed their weekends off and holidays off if you had a big trial, or if you had an important deposition scheduled? And just think about it from the point of view of the clients and the big clients. Big clients and important people, they can afford to, they want people that are taking their matters seriously. And if people are not taking their matters seriously, then that's a major problem. And for example, if you were taking your company public, would you want an attorney that needed to leave the office by 6 each day and needed weekends off? Think about that. Or if you wanted information about a lawyer, wouldn't you want to know how hard they work for you day in and day out? That's very important. Wouldn't you want to be able to hire someone that you were confident was going to constantly be working hard and have your back? And you would want that. And if you didn't have that, you would be probably upset. If you'd just gotten run over by a car, would you want a doctor that was concerned about their quality of life and absent and unable to work on you until Monday? And what I'm saying is, and I hope you can understand this, is that being a lawyer is really signing up to take care of others and to take care of companies and take care of individuals. And the better lawyer you want to be, the more money you want to make, the more serious your clients will be, and the more the quality of work and your commitment to be able to do work will be tested and important. If you don't want to do important and work, and you don't want to have important clients, then that's your decision. But your decision then will be to not make money and to not work on important people, because important people and important clients expect their attorneys to work very hard. It's just how it works. So certain practice areas are more demanding than others. If you want to be a professional with the profound responsibility of handling other people's problems and affecting how their lives end up, you better be very committed to what you're doing. Your lifestyle, they would be any client that's got enough money to spend and is serious enough is going to be all over and need to make sure that their attorney is working as hard as they possibly can on every matter that they have and taking it seriously. And if their attorney's not, they can easily find someone that will. And so if you want to have a career as a good lawyer and a lawyer that works for big clients or important clients or clients with money to spend, you need to have 100% career commitment. And no law firm worth its salt is going to keep anyone around that's not committed. Think about that. Why would a big law firm that pays a lot of money, that can hire all sorts of people and not have an issue do it, why in the world would they want to have somebody working for them that's not committed? Think about that. What's the point of that? There's no point. Any good law firm is going to expect the attorneys to be very committed. Law firms do not want to keep people around who are not committed to what they're doing. No one does. You wouldn't either. And what every law firm is doing day in and day out is they're just testing your commitment. They're seeing, are you willing to go the extra mile? Are you serious about this? Do you care about your clients? Do you care about the firm? Do you care about the work? And this is all it is. It's a commitment test. And are you willing to bill the most hours? Are you willing to show the client and the firm that you're going to do whatever it takes to win, to do a good job? And that's really all it is. And the second you show a lack of commitment in the biggest and best firms, you're showing weakness, and the law firm will push you to the curb. Wouldn't you if you were a law firm? Law firms can have certain people doing work and billing hours, but when push comes to shove, the best attorneys and the ones that the law firms are going to stick behind are the ones that have the most commitment. And all attorneys do by working crazy hours and working as hard as they can and having as much detail of things is they show the commitment to their firm and to the clients. And the second you show a lack of this commitment, the game is generally over in the most competitive firms or in any competitive legal environment, because that's what it's about. It's about being able to protect clients, being able to fight for clients, being able to protect the firm, being able to make the firm money. This is the game. And if you don't like it, then you're in the wrong game, because you're never going to do well in this game if you're not committed, because that's what it requires. The bigger the client, the better the firm, the bigger the firm, the more competitive the firm, the more you're going to be expected to be on top of things. And no one's going to tell you, I'm telling you right now that this is one of the most important factors about lawyers, but it is. It's exactly what separates people that don't make it in large and small firms and working for big clients. Then it's just what it is about. And so if you don't have this level of commitment, nothing good's ever going to happen to you. Not like you want. You will slide down the prestige level of firms and not stick around. You'll not be given good titles. You'll be called a senior associate or of counsel forever. You'll be laid off with the first sign of trouble. All these things, that's exactly what happens to people that don't have a lack of commitment. So you just have to understand right now that if you don't have that, then your odds of succeeding in a large law firm or even a mid-sized or smaller law firm where clients are willing and able to take their work elsewhere to someone who's committed is not going to work. And this is a trap that's out there for the unwary. You can go to a firm as an associate that went to a good law school, and if you interview and get a job, if the market's good, you can get a job as a law student, you get a job even laterally. But the second you show a lack of commitment, those law firms are going to know that they can't trust you with their clients. They can't trust you to make money for them. They can't trust that you'll show that level of commitment to your clients when you get them. And the game's over. It doesn't matter. You can get a job in a good market, but you can't stay employed in a bad market if you're not working hard and doing good work. You can get a job sometimes even in a bad market if you have good schools and things on your resume, but you're not going to get a job with the best firms if you don't show a lack of commitment, because that's all they're looking for. And not all they're looking for, but one of the main things that they're looking for. And if you're not the most committed, you'll typically not get the best assignments. You're not going to advance, and you're often going to be the first one gone when things get slow. And things always get slow. And they always get slow. Things always slow down. Right now, they're slow. So as things slow down, people start getting laid off. They start thinking that the legal profession's bad and there's things wrong with firms. And this always happens. And as an attorney, the job description is to stay busy, work hard, and be committed. This is what you need to do. If a law firm stops giving you work, most times, if a lot of people are slow, there's always going to be people that continually have work. Those people are given work because they're committed and they work the hardest, and people know they take this seriously. If you go and you decide to be part of groups that talk about how it's not good to work hard, how the firm's going to take advantage of you no matter what, how no one makes partner, how it's better off in-house, how this is not a good job. If you want to be part of that crew, that's your choice. But if you do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to advance in the legal profession. Any assignment you get, your only option is really to act like it's the most important thing in the world and give it your all. That's right. Anything you're given, you should act extremely excited. People should think you're grateful for the work, and you should do the best possible job you can. And every piece of work you're given is incredibly important, and you need to do the best you possibly can in it. This is a test that's given to every single person that works in a law firm and what you're expected to do. If you're able to do a good job on your assignments and get work, then you're going to get more work. And if you don't take it seriously, you're in trouble. One error, by the way, and one assignment can ruin your career. I've seen this happen. I've seen people that are top graduates of the best law schools that go in and make a mistake, and this mistake's very serious to the clients and screws up their career. I've seen this when I visit people about lawyer career information. They always think I'm going to talk to them about networking and education, and they're often surprised when I share information about the lawyers who are the most successful. The answer is, and almost always is, that they're committed. People that show their level of commitment and work harder than others, that's the way to get ahead. And if you have a massive and profound commitment to continuing the practice of law at a high level, the commitment, you're going to do well. And there's little doubt, it is true that it's very difficult to stay employed for a long period of time in a large law firm. It's not easy. Large law firms are always pushing people out. It's not easy to stick with a job, but the reason that this happens most of the time is that people are not committed. It's not impossible, but most people, when they lose their job, lose it because they're less committed than other people. They stop giving them work because they're less committed and don't take it seriously. The people prioritize their personal lives and their other things beyond the employer. And the second you start doing that, employers catch on and they ask those people to leave, and they want to share profits and keep people employed with people that are most committed. And that's what they do. There's also a lot of widespread age discrimination that happens in law firms. It's not that they're specifically discriminating against people from age. It's actually experience discrimination, and it favors the young people, because younger people's commitment typically hasn't been tested yet. People want to hire people that they believe have the drive and ambition. to push forward without question. And law firms desperately want to keep people around who are committed and willing to work hard. If you are committed and you work hard and you become more and more senior, and the firm's never going to want to lay you off. The firm's never going to, you're not going to want to look for a new job because you're going to get lots and lots of positive feedback. And so people that are looking for jobs often are doing so because they're not committed. People that are very senior in their career and don't have positions, the way that the legal market looks at it is they may be in that position because they're not committed. Commitment really matters. It's very important. And anything that shows a lack of commitment is often discarded like a virus in the most competitive firms. They push it out because a lack of commitment is against their survival. It's against their clients' survival. If you're not committed, they'll lose clients. If you're not committed, they'll lose money. If they're not committed, you'll do a good job. You'll not do a good job. All this stuff is really what they're looking at. It's commitment. And if you don't have it, you can be in a lot of trouble. I receive phone calls from attorneys daily who've had a really good run, meaning they may have made $500,000 in a large law firm by the time they're 5 years out, which is incredible, but it's not common these days. And they may thought it was okay to leave the practice of law for several months and a year to do something else, meaning they were very successful. And they thought they could rest on their laurels. And so they leave and go do something else. I know a woman that from a large Chicago firm who went to the University of Pennsylvania for law school and became a contractor. I know another guy who practiced securities law at a huge firm and decided to write a book about his private life. I know another firm from a massive firm in Los Angeles who decided to work at a rural legal aid in the rural South. I was looking at a candidate today that was working with us and stopped working with us because she got a job. She was at a huge firm, like one of the most prestigious firms, and got a position with a law firm taking care of, with a public interest organization, taking care of wounded fish or something, and was very proud of that, as if she'd made a great career move. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking care of wounded fish, but the point is that lack of commitment is something that's going to hurt her when she tries to come back. Another woman I saw start a soap company. Another guy worked at a really good firm that I like, Fried Frank, after graduating from Harvard Law School, and then went to work in his dad's business for a few years. I know another woman that finished at the top of her law school class at NYU and decided to start a clothing line in New York after finishing at the top of her class. I know another guy, and people do this all the time from Yale and Stanford and great schools, went to teach and then wanted to come back to a law firm after doing that for a few years. And the point is, are you kidding? People that do this stuff, I'm not necessarily against people that do this. I think that you should follow your passion and do what you want. But once you walk away from the practice of law, these law firms are often never, ever going to hire you again. And the reason is because you've shown that you're not committed. And why would someone, if you're practicing some branch of law, say you're doing project finance, and you decide to go take care of wounded birds, come on, is that something that, or file lawsuits for, that's not showing that's not showing commitment to being a project finance attorney. That's not showing commitment. That's not showing commitment to the practice of law. That's not showing commitment. That's showing someone that probably doesn't like what they're doing and wants to do something else. So no matter how well it's spun, it does not and will not, cannot possibly work. And this advice is very critical for attorneys. Attorneys need to understand that you never should leave your position. If you leave your position, you're going to look like a slacker. And it's very important. It's not because these attorneys are not brilliant and interesting. It's because they're not 115% committed to working in a large law firm and practicing law. They're not. They're interested in doing something else. And why hire someone that's not committed? A law firm can find people to do jobs all day long that are committed and have never left a law firm and want to do the work and are working hard. But why hire someone that's not committed? Law firms have lots of choices and lots of committed people that want to work there. If you're trying to get a job in a big firm, you're competing with a lot of people. And anything that shows a lack of commitment is not considered a good thing. Why would any law firm take a risk and hire you? Why would they want their clients to take a risk with this person? It doesn't think about that. Why would a law firm want someone that's uncommitted? If someone's not committed, then that's it. Law firms take their chances on people like this from time to time. I see large law firms and doing this sort of thing all the time. And it can work, and you can get back into a law firm after doing this stuff. But generally, this is a bad idea for the law firms because they almost always get burned. So the example would be, you could take it from a relationship, for example. So if you meet someone and say you're single and you meet someone who's been divorced 3 times and each marriage was a year or something, the odds are that they're probably going to meet someone, and if they get married again, probably be divorced in a year again. It's like that with people that jump jobs. I see resumes all the time where the person was like at one firm for 1 year, the next firm for 1 year, the next firm for 1 year, the next firm for 1 year. Any law firm that knows what's going on is never going to hire someone that's moving around like that, because they know they'll just do the same thing again. People have patterns. Someone that leaves to go in-house will go to a law firm and we'll work a little while, and we'll probably go back in-house. Someone that leaves to go do public interest work will probably leave and go. Someone that's happy being unemployed for 3 or 4 months because they're taking a career break will probably do the same thing when they go to a law firm again. Law firms are smart. And what the law firms see is they see that these free spirits will come back to the law firm, and then within a few months we'll get bored or something and we'll start looking for something else to do again. Again, there's nothing wrong with you not wanting to be committed to a law firm. All I'm saying is that if you're trying to be committed, then it's really not something that's necessarily in your best interest. People will say the law firm's too straining, or they need a smaller firm, or they want something that gives them a better quality of life. I've heard it all. And I've often heard from attorneys that leave big law firms. This is a very simple thing I've been hearing for decades. I looked at the lives of the partners we're leading. I didn't want to be like them. That's why I left. This is what a lot of people say. And basically they're saying partners work a lot and it's very stressful, and therefore they're going to leave. And yeah, that's fine. Great decision. But the problem is, and again, I think someone wrote an article about what I said next. But the point is that you may not make enough money making that decision, and you may not even be able to support a family and not have a job. If you've gone to law school and learned a trade and then been fortunate enough to get a job with a law firm and being taught a practice area and so forth, you spend a lot of time doing that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have something, that you have a skill, but you may just not like your job. You may not like working. And again, maybe it's not great being a partner for some people, and there's nothing wrong with not doing that. But the partners that are doing this work, it's actually very noble and important work. They have a job, they're providing for their family, and at least working and contributing to society. And if you walk away from that, you have to ask yourself, am I going to be in a position where I'm supporting my family or contributing to society? And I don't know, is that happening or not? And you need to stick by that decision if it's to leave because you don't like the lifestyle of a partner, and ask yourself if it's a good decision. Now, I'm not saying, and of course, I don't practice law in a big firm, so I'm not judging you for not doing that, or even in a law firm I don't work. But if you're not working in a law firm and not doing that, you have to understand, what is your choice? Are you choosing to do something else completely? And is that going to make you happier? And actually, and a lot of times, it may. A lot of attorneys that leave law firms are unhappy there, and they've made the absolute right decision leaving the law firm because they are happier doing something else, and they're not committed to it, and they realize it, and they don't like the work, they don't like the environments. And if that's your position, then you're doing the right thing. But you have to be you have to understand that regardless if it's practicing law, starting a pizza restaurant, starting a clothing line, selling soaps, for whatever it is, if you're not committed to it, you're still not going to do that. So is commitment a product of leaving the law firm? Is a product of that you don't like practicing law? Or is commitment something that's about you and about anything you do? Because anything you do, you can succeed at. You can succeed beyond your wildest expectations doing lots of things, but you definitely need to be committed. And it's interesting that when an attorney starts work, they're surrounded by very competitive people inside of a law firm. There's no doubt about it that law firms are extremely competitive, and the people in them are very competitive, and it's very competitive. And the question of why attorneys aren't allowed to show weakness and why they're expected to portray sense of lack of vulnerability has a lot of questions, a lot of components to it. And I think what's important for you to understand is what are these components? What is the issue with vulnerability? Why can't attorneys be vulnerable? And really, what most of this boils down to is attorneys as advocates. And what that means is that attorneys are expected to take sides. And once they take a side, they're expected to do everything they can to advance that side, meaning you're an advocate and you cannot, if you watch attorneys in court defending murderers and stuff, or regardless, they'll act as if the person's not a murderer, and they'll get behind them and try that. This is what they're expected to do. As an attorney, you're also supposed to be getting behind your client and being an advocate for what they do. Even if the client has done something wrong, you can't show their weakness. And it's very interesting. I like watching these crime shows, and I typically watch them while I'm on a treadmill or Stairmaster or something. I like to watch them a lot. And when I'm watching these shows, it's always funny because there's always a guilty attorney that's defended a guilty person. And those attorneys have defended guilty people, are always, even years later, decades later, will still rise to the defense of them and say why they shouldn't have been convicted and all this stuff. And it's very interesting because in most cases, when they're doing that kind of stuff, the person obviously is guilty. And in the legal profession, when you're advocating from one side, there's all sorts of games being played, and one side is psyching the other out, and people in a law firm maybe even start rumors and things to bring you down. You don't know. And everybody's really trying to break your sense of commitment. But your job is to stay focused and committed. Look at like politicians. I'm not taking sides, but imagine what would happen if every time a politician was tested, if they gave up. Imagine what would happen to someone like Trump if every time people had criticized him, or every time people had sued him, or every time he'd been indicted, that he gave up and said, hey, it's way too much pain to be trying to be a politician. I don't want to do it anymore. I give up. This is not what successful people do. It's not what successful billionaires do. It's not what successful people do in any profession. Interesting thing too, again, I'm not here to defend Trump, but I'm just giving you examples, is when he was during the first presidential race, he basically tested his opponents and got everyone to give up. He psyched them out. He said mean things to them and fought against them, and people gave up. And people give up all the time. This is what the world's about. People will psych you out. People will say bad things to you. People will play games with you. People give up practicing law. They give up everything. They give up trying to be a musician. I can't tell you how many people I've known that wanted to be a musician that gave up. I've seen people give up trying to be an actor. People give up that. They have their passion. They think, I want to be an actor. I want to be a musician. I want to be a model. I'm going to be this and I'm going to be that. I want to be a writer. I want to be whatever you want to be. Most of the time, you will give up. Most people give up on their dreams and what they were meant to do. And that's just a fact. And I don't know what the reasons are that people give up. Most of the problems that you experience in your life and your career are the result of giving up. People give up on relationships. They give up on marriages. They give up on trying to quit drugs and alcohol. They give up on trying to fix their emotional and mental problems. People give up. And I have to ask you, what have you given up on? Because the odds are pretty good that there's a lot of stuff that you've given up on your life that if you hadn't given up and you'd pushed through, you probably would have done a lot better. So there's something, people dabble in things. So if you start taking tennis lessons, and what'll happen is for a little while, you'll get very good and then are much, much better. You'll make a lot of progress. And then at some point that progress will stop. And when that progress stops, you won't get the satisfaction that you're improving every day, even though there's small, subtle changes and improvements that may be happening. You won't get the constant reassurance about how better you're doing. And at some point, you'll just give up and you'll try something else. And instead of trying to become a great tennis player or something, I'll tell you, in my profession, I have met hundreds of recruiters in the legal space. Most of them, almost all of them, have given up. Ones that don't give up, they give up on improving. They're like, okay, I do things this way. That's all I'm going to do. I'm done. And if you want to succeed at anything, you just cannot give up. When you give up, there's often a sense of frustration that follows you throughout your life. When you give up and you choose a life and career, it's often less fulfilling, and your days are filled with regret and thoughts about what could have been. I've certainly given up on a lot of things. I went to business school for a very short time, I gave up on that, even though that probably would have been a very good thing for me. I've given up on the practice of law, even though pushing that was not meant for me, but I certainly have regrets from time to time. And there's all sorts of things that I believe I could have done differently and I didn't do. And the same thing for you. You can give up on the practice of law. You can give up on trying to work with a large law firm. You can stop trying and you can sell yourself out for something that is less than you are capable of being and doing. Lots of people do that. But when you give up, there's a sense of frustration and regret that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. I meet attorneys, incredible. I meet people in their late 70s that say, I worked for Skadden one summer. Wow, really? One summer? Or I worked for Davis Polk for 6 months when I graduated from law school. You did? Wow, why not? Again, people talk about what could have been, and always there's something I didn't like it, or was too pressure, or is it wasn't passing the bar, and I gave up on the bar. I met people that give up on the bar. Someone, goes to Harvard Law School at the top of their class, takes the bar twice and fails and give up. I'm done with being a lawyer. You give up. And when you give up on things, your days are filled with regret and thoughts about what could have been. And you feel you should have done something differently than you did or did not do. And you stop trying and you sell out for something that comes more easily, that is less than you're capable of being or doing. Think about that. What are you capable of doing? Who are you capable of being? If you give up, and again, a lot of people do, if you give up, you'll never know, because giving up is easy. When you give up, you're choosing a path that's much, much harder. And if you choose that path, much, much easier. Anybody can choose an easier path. It's easier to go get a job in a factory than it is to go to college. It's easier to stay home and go to a community college than to go away to, to Cornell. There's lots of things that you can do that are easy. But if you take the easy way out, it's not always going to help you. And most of the world, and most of the legal profession is full of people who gave up. You can drive through a city, and if you look around, you'll see people who live who gave up, and people where the people live who do not give up. In every town, again, I'm not saying wealth's everything, but in every town, there's houses that are small and stuff, and there's houses that are big and huge and giant gates and gardens. And the houses with the giant gates and gardens are always the people that didn't give up. You can't talk to these people and they don't say, oh, I did this and now I've been dabbling in this. No, those are people that have a firm commitment to something. It could be anything. It could be having a body shop repairing cars, but they have a chain of them. Or it could be cleaning houses, but having a huge company that does lots of buildings and stuff. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. But the homes of the people that didn't give up are generally much nicer and larger. And so in everything you do, you're faced with a lot of resistance the higher you attempt to climb. Anybody that's trying to achieve anything is going to get shot down and attacked. Think about what happens to politicians, any politician. It doesn't have to be someone trying to be president. It could be someone trying to be a governor. Everyone's trying to shoot them down. They're criticizing them. They're going in the past. They're talking about how bad they are. They're making them think that there's something wrong with them. And if you want to be the best at anything, you're going to come across people all the time. They're going to attempt to push you down and get you out of the way because you're a threat to them or they want to do better than you. I remember, well, I'm not even going to talk about it, but I've been in a lot of situations where certainly people have come at me because I was a threat. It could be going to a new high school and some girl liking me, and then that's a threat to who knows. There's all sorts of things that people will come at you for. It could be anything. It could be socially. It could be in your work. But the better you are, the more you're going to be threatening. I'm certainly threatening to people in my industry, and that's not good. I have to overcome obstacles. A lot of times people will do psychological games with you, and obstacles are often put in your way. But the point is, if you push through those obstacles, there's often going to be massive rewards on the other side if you don't give up. And the rewards at the top are significant, but literally the rewards are only available to those who don't give up. And most people end up giving up. That's just how it is. It's always been that way, probably always will be that way. And if you give up, you're going to be in a much different situation than if you don't. And many of these obstacles are often just imagined and aren't really obstacles at all. Sometimes people create obstacles to give themselves an excuse for not caring on and getting better. So they'll come up with some issue or some imagined issue that they give up because of. There's just all sorts of reasons that people do that. But the odds are that you'll give up to over 95% of attorneys out there, you can look at their resume and their path, 95% of them end up giving up. And when an attorney gets laid off, because maybe because they haven't shown enough commitment, or maybe it's just not their fault. Sometimes junior associates without any experience will go to work someplace and immediately get laid off. You just never know. But and it's not their fault. But for the most part, when a firm decides to lay people off, and I don't say this, I'm not saying this in a positive thing at all, because I don't like having to say it, but most of these firms do not lay off everyone. Most firms won't. And again, some people manage to work so hard and track down so much work that they never get laid off. And so you need to think about that. The people that are most committed typically are most likely to not get laid off. And if you are laid off, your odds of getting into a position with a big firm become much slimmer. And people ask why you got laid off. And if I ask one attorney why they got laid off, I mean, this is an interesting one. I asked the guy why he got laid off, and he said he didn't make his hours. And he talked about, I'll never forget this, the assignment system at the firm. He'd basically have to beg for work. He said, I was not there to beg, I was there to work, not beg. Then he would say, I did not make my hours. And that particular attorney had been unemployed for a year just because he didn't know how to get work. And I've been reviewing hundreds of resumes of attorneys per day for years, for my entire career. And what I can tell you is that very few of these resumes show commitment. And anyone that shows a lack of commitment is typically stamped out and unwelcome in the legal profession. A lot of times people start off strong and then they fall off the map. And very few attorneys have the stamina and the willpower to keep going and not give up. And this pattern never changes. An attorney can go to great schools. They can work very hard in them. They can get a great job when they get out of school. But eventually, without a lack of commitment, the upward mobility in their career ends because they don't have the level of commitment they need. And your commitment, by the way, needs to be constant and never ending. You need to never stop being committed, even for a moment. And every attorney, by the way, knows the importance of commitment. Again and again, I've noticed that if someone attended a very good preparatory high school, for example, they often are very proud of this and they'll put it front and center on their resume. You don't see people doing this, for example, with public high schools. They don't do that, but they do with a good private high school. If someone's in the armed services, they typically put this on your resume. And you don't see people advertising the fact that they worked at McDonald's for 2 years before or after college, but they always put the armed services there if they did that because they're proud of it. And a lot of times Mormon men that are missionaries will put this on their resume. You don't see them advertising the religion on their resumes, but people that are missionaries often like to write that. They'll say, oh, I was a missionary in Brazil or in China or whatever, and they'll talk about that and that they learned some of the language. So people always do that. If someone played a college sport, they'll almost always put that on their resume as well. And people never put the fact on the resume that they did intramural sports in college on their resume, but sometimes they do. But if someone's run a marathon, they often put that on their resume. And people often won't never put the fact that they've run a 5K on their resume. And the reason people put this stuff on their resumes is because it shows a high level of commitment and follow through. Being in the Army, sure, massive commitment. Going as a missionary to a foreign country and learning the language there, yep, lots of commitment. Going to a super demanding private high school, sure, commitment. Even playing a varsity sport in college, lots of commitment. What's the other one we had there? We had running a marathon, tons and tons of commitment. So all of these things show commitment, and people are proud of commitment. And law firms, by the way, like seeing commitment. And people are very proud when they've committed to something and accomplished it. And it's not easy, for example, to move into an Army barracks and live there for a few years, ride a bicycle around a foreign country trying to convert people to your religion, move away from your parents when you're 13 and go stay in a dormitory in a boarding school and work hard or run a marathon or play a college sport. None of this stuff is easy. And all of this stuff requires a ton of commitment. And all of these things are events in people's lives they're proud of, and they show a lot of commitment. People did something they were proud of, they pushed through, and they completed it. And people become defined by what they commit to and what they complete. That's just how it works. And many of these people may go their entire lives without completing something and succeeding at it ever again. And the feeling they got from completing something when they were younger that not what everyone is able to do is something that defines them for the rest of their lives. So I had an interesting thing happen. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Ohio and meeting there were just some people that I'm very close with, and I'm not related to them, but I consider them family of sorts, and I do, and they are family, I guess. And there was a guy at the wedding that I'd known since he was young. He graduated from college, from high school. He bounced around a lot, not really doing much. I think he might have gotten into trouble with the law for something stupid, and then just became lazy, didn't work, then got a kind of a low-wage job, sweeping up in a factory or something. Maybe did that and then did a couple other things. Then he went in the Army. And when he went in the Army, they had all these things where you had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. This is for the 3 or 4 years he was in there and run. And then different days of the week were different types of exercises like lifting and legs one day and upper body the other. Anyway, all these different things, and then working all these hours and things. And what's so fascinating is I hadn't seen him in several years, and he was a completely different person. And very proud of the Army, and I'm very proud of all this stuff. And he'd never gotten that level of self-confidence, or never been in a situation where he'd been able to be committed. And he now had a very good job, and with the skill that he learned there, and was defined by it. The benefit of things like that, of all these things that are commitment, is it helps you prove to yourself that you're capable of committing to doing something and being something. And a lot of people aren't. And these sort of experiences push everyone to accomplish something. And when you're pushing yourself, you can accomplish something. And being the best you can be at something will require you often to work the hardest and commit to it. There's really no other way. But being with a group of people doing the same thing will often require you to commit. The most difficult thing is committing on your own and having faith in yourself to continue and do something no matter what resistance you face. And you will always face resistance. And your ability to focus and not give up is what is required. And to do that, you need stamina, perseverance. And I remember when I was in public high school that a kid in our class left to go to a more prestigious private high school in the area. And the following year, he came back and he sat in our class for a day. And I was very impressed because I was just going to this public high school. It was actually a very good school. Nothing just bad to say about it. And this kid came back, and the teacher asked him to describe the difference between the private school and what it had been like in the public school. And he said that the work was basically the same. However, in the private school, there were several hours of homework required each night. And he said, just a lot more work is all he said. And honestly, the secret of a lot of good schools, and there's really no other secret, it's very interesting, especially at private schools, is they typically pile a lot of work on people. So people get very used to working hard. I went to a private prep school, and I got so much work, it was crazy. But what that does is it helps you build perseverance, and it gives you the ability and expectation to have to work hard all the time. They're just building commitment. They're making you work really hard because you're committed. And they push people as hard as they can be pushed in terms of their studying, in terms of what's expected in their classes, that those people will likely be much more successful with these habits than without them. And that really is one of the most important things. And it's partly for this reason that people from the best high schools often do much, much better than people from public schools. It's just because they're so used to working hard, and that the bar is raised higher than it would be in a lot of public schools. And these work commitments and commitment make them better students, and they give them the expectation that they're going to have to work harder no matter what they do. And honestly, the real world is often about much more than being smart. It's really about commitment. And you need to be enormously committed and work very hard when you get out in the real world. You just have to. There's no other choice. And law firms like the real world all test your commitment. They test the commitment of their associates, and they test the commitment of their partners. And the worst thing that can happen to you is get pushed off this path because you weren't committed when you could have been. There's no job, by the way, no job that's going to pay substantial rewards, that is easy to do and doesn't require commitment. If you want to do financially, if you want to do well in terms of your prestige and what other people think of you or your brand, you need to be committed. And so the next time you really think about being committed and getting off the bus, you need to remember that being on the bus can often lead to great things you may never see if you decide to get off. And the path of least resistance always looks the most attractive. Today, for example, I'm making this webinar. I would like to be outside where it's beautiful and the sun's shining, and this is what I do. And so I'm committed. And then you're watching this. You could be doing the same thing. You're committed to your career. And this is what's important. You need to be committed. You need to learn. You need to push yourself. You need to do all these things that are going to make you better. And there's always easier paths for people to follow. But the road to success and power is never easy. Just look at all the obstacles that your business heroes or your religious heroes or your lawyer heroes went through to get to where they are. It's always a lot of resistance, and you have to be committed. And frankly, most of the world is out there envies people that are committed. And my challenge to you would be that you would really think about all this and become the most committed you can be in the legal profession. Because if you are committed, everything else is going to fall into place. And unfortunately, most people are not committed. And because they're not committed, there's all sorts of problems and things that they end up having in their careers, and nothing ever works out. All you need to do to be really good at your job, regardless of what it is be committed. A couple other things, and I just I'll touch on them real briefly, is what does commitment mean? It means when you go to work someplace, you don't think about just looking for a job because things are rough, or you think you might be able to make more money elsewhere if you left. There's all sorts of reasons that people leave positions, and then they do it again and again. If you're committed, it also means that you're willing to stick with people in your life, meaning significant others and things, if you're committed. And I'll tell you one final story, and then I guess I'll end this. But it's actually moving, but I was at this wedding in Ohio. It's in a small town where people pretty much are from there and they stay there. And this is a place in very rural Ohio. And anyway, it was in this old bank. It was converted to a banquet venue, and it was just nothing going on in this town. But all the people from the town were invited to this wedding. And so they're farmers, and it was, anyway, so they did this thing where the bride and groom, they danced. So they did their big dance together. And then this DJ, who was basically this kid in front of a Macintosh playing songs, announced that now they were going to invite up all the people that were had just celebrated their first anniversary. And there were maybe 150 people at this wedding. And very interesting. So then they kept going up, and they said, okay, second year, and then 5 years, and then 10 years, and 20 and 30. But anyway, they got to the point where it was like 65 years of people being married. And that was like this, the whole dance floor was like crowded with all these people. And the people at 65 had gotten married when they were 19. And then I realized when I looked around that, I'm not married, or I'm in the process of getting divorced for a long time, so I was alone. But I realized when I looked around, there were all these people up there. The only people in the audience were children and some teenagers and myself. And I thought about that. I was like, this is incredible. Wow. Like all these people up there are married and have been in these committed relationships, and there wasn't anybody besides me and some kids in this audience. And I thought, wow, that's commitment. And maybe commitment means things in different parts of the country. Maybe this was an unusual wedding. I don't know. But I thought that was amazing that there's parts of the world people are committed. I also see that in people that go to work in smaller markets. A lot of times they've been with the same firm for their whole careers. And so commitment, really a lot to it. Are you committed to your relationship? Are you committed to your employer? And the best people, often the most marketable, are people that have been with the employer for a long time, because that shows commitment. Or they stick with a profession and they continue doing the same things in the same practice area and the same practice setting. And so all this stuff about commitment is hugely important, and something, unfortunately, that a lot of people never realize how important it is. And because of that, they have a lot of problems in their lives. Certainly, had I been married to the same person when I was young and stayed married and committed, I bet my life would have been a lot different than it is. If I'd stayed with the same job, and a lot different than it is. And would I be happier? I don't know. But when you commit to something, it definitely has a lot of meaning. And one final point is, why is it so important to commit to a practice area? Why is it so important to commit to a practice setting? Why is it important? What I've noticed is what I do is essentially only law firm placements of lateral attorneys. And what I see, and it's incredible, is every single day I'm learning something new, like lots of things. Like I was working this morning for 4 or 5 hours, and I took 10 pages of notes, not 10, but then probably 3 or 4 pages of typed notes, just about attorneys in different practice areas and how to build a list of firms for them, and stuff that just boom, it's just completely like tons and tons of information. And so the point is, the longer you commit to something, the more depth you can look at it, the better you get, and the more effective you are. There's one story that's a famous story. It's about a carpenter that walks into a room, and the person's saying, "Oh, I have this, this floor has always been creaking. It's been creaking for 20 years. No one can fix it. I think I need to rip it up. And what do I do?" And the carpenter, who's been a carpenter for 30 plus years or whatever, looks around, he walks up and down, and then he says, "Okay." And then he takes out a nail and he pounds it into a board, I guess one of the boards on the floor. And all of a sudden, the creaking and all this noise on the floor stops. And then he gives the guy a bill, and the bill's for, I don't know, $200.25. And the guy said, $200.25? Why is this so much? This is crazy. This job took you like a minute. And he says the 25 cents is for the nail, and the $200 is for knowing where to put the nail. And that's my experience and what you're paying for. So that's really what it's about, is when you're focused on something and committed to something, like this guy been a carpenter for all the time, you know where things are at and you can do a better job. It's the same thing with attorneys. I remember, and then I'll end at that, but I remember when I was a summer associate in this big New York firm, and for whatever reason, they'd put me having me do tax law. And so I'd spent, I don't know, a week and a half trying to fix this tax problem. And it was something to do with an offshore company that owned an apartment in New York and was trying to do something rather, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I gave it to another associate, and I gave it to a senior associate. He looked it over and worked on it. He couldn't figure it out. And so this firm both of us were like totally confused. And then I think they even had a more senior associate look at it. He was confused. And so we went into the office of this very senior attorney, and he looked at it. He said, "Yeah, this is very confusing, but can you close the door and come back in an hour, and I'll let you know what the solution is." And we said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And he said, "I need to think about this. And when I think about it, I'll come up with an answer." And then 30 minutes later, my phone rang, and he said, "Come on in here." And he'd figured out this incredibly complex issue just by focusing on it. It was something that I couldn't figure out and his associates couldn't figure out, but he could figure out because he had all the experience. And so this is how it is when you commit to the practice of law. The more you do it, the more you'll see into it. And that particular guy, I remember, was one of the most successful people in his practice area in the country and very well known. And so he was committed. So that's really the presentation. Last week, I took a ton of questions, and I think we did almost a 5-hour webinar where we did resumes. And so I don't want to cut into, and I had to put off a few appointments for that. And then, so today I'm only going to take a few questions, and I apologize because I know this is a very important webinar, so I wanted to make sure I gave it, but I'll take a few questions, and then I need to leave a little bit early because I need to get to some other things. But then next week, if you did ask questions today or do ask questions and I don't get to them, and then what I'll do is I'll make sure I cover those at the webinar next week. I think that this has been a very interesting topic, and I'm excited to take a few questions. I don't know how much time I have because I don't have my watch in front of me. But once we do that, then then we'll wrap things up. So just take a quick break for a couple minutes. I just have to go grab some notes, and then I'll come back and do questions. Okay, so first question is, can you give specific examples or situations that attorneys should avoid in order to safeguard their careers? Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm going to share the document. Perfect. Okay, so this specific examples of behaviors attorneys should avoid in order to safeguard their careers. I think the biggest example is anytime, and this is actually a good question. So anytime you're given work or working on something, the most important thing you can do is to give it your all. Give it your all. So what does that mean? What that means is when you're given work, you're expected to make a major effort in whatever it is you're doing. Like, you're expected to work as many hours as you can on it. You're expected to be as thorough as you can, and you're expected to take it as seriously as you possibly can. If you don't do that, you're going to be in trouble. So one of the things, and this is, I think, one of the best examples of this, and that I like, but one of the things that people often do is when they're given a certain assignment, this is the biggest mistake you can make. They'll often think, oh, this firm is trying to run up the bill, or this is this is inappropriate for me to be asked this, or this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I have a better solution. I know how that works. And they'll take like a smart ass attitude to whatever the assignment is and whatever they can fix. And because of that, it ends up harming them, meaning people don't want to give them work anymore. They're difficult to work with, and people don't want to give them assignments. So you need to be very cognizant that when you're given work by people, you really need to take that work seriously, and you need to be prepared to give it your all, not find excuses not to do it, not to find loopholes, to really do the best you possibly can. You also need to realize when someone's giving you work that it's not your position to editorialize on the work, meaning to talk about why it doesn't need to be done, or to question the reason for it's given, or to say it's unethical to be given this, or to act you're put out by it, all those sorts of things. So this is something a lot of people do. I've seen it a lot. And if you do that, it ends up creating lots of trouble for you in the long run. So you need to be very careful about that. Yeah, the next question. So what are some common misconceptions and blind spots that attorneys tend to have as highlighted in this webinar? Blind spots. The biggest blind spot is that work is, I would say work is a privilege, and I'm generally going to spell privilege. All right. Work is a privilege and you should take it seriously. So what does that mean? So work being a privilege means that when you're given assignments and given work to do, the law firm or the person you're working for can always give that work to someone else. So acting like you're put out by giving assignments, acting like you're put out by working with a certain partner, acting like, you should be given better work or something else, never is in your best interest. You need to do whatever you can to act like the work you're given is important to you and that you take it seriously. And the other misconception is that the law firm doesn't have choices of who it's going to give work to. So every law firm that has, every law firm that has work has lots of choices who they give that work to. And if they don't choose you, then they're going to potentially give it to someone else. So you need to be very aware that whoever is giving you work could give that same work to someone else. Let me see here. And so take it as seriously as you possibly can. And that's one of the biggest blind spots. A few more questions, then you have to get going a little early today. So do you have any tips for attorneys regarding maintaining a healthy work-life balance and avoiding burnout? So this is the biggest piece of advice that I can give you. And I think there's a couple different points to it. The first thing is no one is ever going to tell you to take it easy. To take it easy. And what does that mean? That means that it is never, no partner, no one's ever going to tell you to slow down. You're going to have to make the decision yourself. You need to make decisions about protecting your own work-life balance. Your own work-life balance. And what does that mean? Work-life balance. That means that it's your responsibility to do whatever you can to make sure that you're protecting your work-life balance. And what does that mean? That means that you're carving out time for yourself, you're making time for yourself, and you're not allowing yourself to go crazy working too many hours, which a lot of people do. Now, the next thing that you need to do to maintain a healthy work-life balance, and I think this is also very important, is you need to do whatever you can to try to find work that you enjoy. So you should be looking forward to work and not regretting it. And when you start not looking forward to work anymore, and it becomes something that you just detest and you can't see yourself doing, then you either need to find a new job in a different firm that's different. Sometimes it may be a new practice area. Sometimes it may be a different practice setting, or sometimes it may be you're just in the wrong career. If you are completely unhappy doing what you're doing and you don't find any joy in it, and it really is that difficult for you, then yes, then you probably are doing the wrong thing, because you should try to find joy in things. Now, another thing that's important, I think, are vacations. Taking time off and getting some balance and clearing your head is also really important. Okay, let me see here. You mentioned that attorneys are never taught certain critical aspects that can serve as career killers. In your opinion, why do these aspects are often neglected? The reason there's a lot of stuff here in what you're saying. Legal education, and there's nothing wrong with legal education, but the people that teach legal education are most often, except in seminars and things, are not practicing attorneys. They're law professors, and law professors are in a profession that's actually a very good profession that doesn't talk about having to work hard and talk about the stresses. Their job is to teach you how to learn about torts or constitutional law or corporate law. They're not there to teach you how to work in a legal environment. And yeah, legal environments are very stressful, and being in those environments is something that as an attorney, you need to really learn how to survive in. And you're not going to get that, but you're not going to be taught commitment. You're not going to be taught what it takes to succeed in these environments. And that's what I'm talking about with you today. Let's see. This question here, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure I understand this, but I'm going to answer this anyway. What are some specific industry trends or changes in the legal landscape they should be aware of in order to stay ahead of potential career challenges? Okay, that's actually an interesting question. So one of the things is that the United States is, in general, it doesn't matter to me why, but is becoming, you have different factions, which are, I don't know, what you would call it liberals versus conservatives. Conservatives, which again, and those are, let's just be honest here, conservatives are essentially different value systems. So, what is important to one person versus another, and it doesn't really concern me why. I'm not taking sides here. And essentially, those two sides are fighting for power or whatever, power over society, and et cetera. You would have one side that says, oh, it's protect life, sanctity. And the other side says, oh, it's women should do what they want with their body, whatever. And it's just, people are just fighting about all sorts of different things, and there's different factions. So what I think is one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of those values on both sides, law firms are increasingly taking the sides of one or the other. And it doesn't concern me which ones or why or how much. But the problem with all that is that you may identify with one of those two values, or you may not, but it's going to definitely impact your career, because those different factions are going to want you to believe and follow certain ideas and be careful about saying certain things. And you can be deplatformed. And anyway, it doesn't really matter to me what that means. And I don't want to get myself into trouble here. But what I do think is important to understand about these factions and the challenges is that because of this, it really does obscure the fact that the most important thing is just being committed to the work you do and providing the best work you possibly can, and not taking sides, because the number one objective, let's be honest here, the number one objective of all this that you should be as an attorney is to be an advocate, to be an advocate for your clients and do the best job possible. Your clients, work hard, be committed, and do the best job possible. And without making these values, it's something that governs your work. So why do I say that? And why do I say all this stuff? I say it not because I'm conservative or liberal or whatever. I say this because what I see happen all the time is once you come out as one of these is really on the side of this or on the side of this at any employer, you're taking a stance against something that is automatically potentially going to alienate certain people and upset certain people. It doesn't matter which one of these there is, and it doesn't matter what your firm is, but the more you allow this to impact your decisions and their clients and the way you work, the more it's going to potentially harm your clients and your relationship with your employer. So you just have to be very careful. And again, I'm not saying one of these is wrong or the other. It doesn't really matter. But what I do know is that when I'm around people that are very liberal, they'll talk about how they, not knowing my particular point of view, they'll talk about how much they hate Republicans and how we do this for work and how much this. And then when I'm around people that are very conservative, it's the opposite. So I know that this is a very important trend in terms of how issues and things are handled. And I think it's a challenge. And I think that you can get yourself into lots of hot water by making your something you should do. So how does that work? It works because, or what happens with that? A lot of times people that are very liberal, for example, may put on their resume all this pro bono stuff they did. And I've noticed that a lot of times they put it before even the work that they did at the firm, and then they just list that secondly. And that shows this is what your focus is. And conservatives, if you put things about being conservative or conservative groups in your resume, especially in big cities like New York or San Francisco, that are obviously very liberal, that's going to turn people off too. And your objective really is to just come out and then try to do good work and not make your political and social views really part of what you're doing in a law firm, because law firms represent all sorts of people. So that, I think, is probably the biggest thing I can say about one of the challenges. I think that's a huge challenge because I think it hurts a lot of people's careers that really, when it's not really relevant to what you're doing. Okay, so I think that's about it. I do see several more questions, and I will try to do those next week, but I do have a hard stop at 90 minutes here today, and it's not been quite that. But so I appreciate everyone being on this webinar. I think this was a great webinar in terms of the topics, and I apologize for not getting to everyone's questions, but I will do that next week. So thank you.